My name is Steve Town. I'll be chairing this evening's proceedings. We do want to make our meetings available to as many people as possible, regardless of where they are. So we always use a hybrid setup of here in person in the Town Hall chamber and online via Zoom. A little bit of housekeeping for those in the room. The emergency exit is off in the rear corner. The assembly point's in the car park. Toilets can be accessed through the doors on the right, and there is an accessible toilet to the right of the accessible lift. For panelists on Zoom, please raise your electronic raise hand and by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of your screen. For those in the room, just please raise your hand. For attendees on Zoom, please pose questions through your Q&A board. Attendees' names will become visible on the questions board for the record as your question is answered. For those in the room, again, please raise your hand. Tonight, Jane will clerk, Jane Welling, and Hannah will manage the questions board and the participant setting. The meeting is being recorded for minuting purpose, and we also live stream to our YouTube channel. So, item number 2 on the agenda.
Can I just add, it said it's being recorded by our participants as well.
Yeah.
It's because it goes onto here, I believe. So it should just be our internal laptops that are joined.
Thank you very
much. Okay. So I'm guessing. Thank you all for turning up. I'm guessing you're all here for the master name. But if there's any other questions or comments or information from the public, now's the chance to raise it.
Some questions, Steve.
Yes.
Oh.
One other point. Can everybody use the microphone, please, when they're speaking? Because otherwise the people online can't hear.
I know that Pip and I pretty much know everybody here, but I'm not sure that everybody does. And I don't know if this is normal at your town council meetings, but certainly from our perspective, it would be lovely if we could just get a quick, I know you're Steve, but a quick who everyone else is.
Right.
Please.
Shall I do that, or do you want to do it individually?
I'm Richard Ackroyd, councillor for another week or 2 weeks, something like that.
Yeah, I'm Sheila Gore, and again, I'll be stepping down on the 5th.
Mark Dorrington, Town Councillor for Market Ward, and unfortunately got me for another 5 years.
Anna Panisha, I'm Assistant Finance Officer, taking the minutes.
And my name's Steve Tanner, as I said, and I'll be here for another 5 years as well.
I'm Jane Llewellyn, the Planning and Development Manager for the Town Council, and I've no idea how much longer I'm going to be here.
I'm John Nelson, Councillor for Park Ward for another week and a half or so.
Paul Horton, Councillor for Oakfield. Again, only a week and a half to go for me.
Thanks very much. Right. So there's no other questions or comments from anyone? Great. Move on. Item number 3 on the agenda to agree the apologies of absence we've got first. Apologies of absence I've got from Lizzie.
Yeah.
So we've just got apologies of absence from Lizzie. Do we have to vote on that?
Yes,
Oh
please.
dear. Could someone propose that, please? Thank you, John. Seconded. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda, any declaration of members' interests. So I've got one. I should declare an interest in item number 816, 34 Innox Hill. I know the applicant reasonably well. Paul?
Yeah, declaration of interest. One of the applications is one of mine. I can't remember which number it is.
828 and 829.
828 and 829. Any other declarations? No? Great. Thank you very much. Item number 5 on the agenda. To agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of March 2002, which I have here. Take it all councillors have had a look. If someone could propose them for me. Thank you, John. Second by Rich. Great.
That's unanimous.
Quickly scratch that and give that to Hannah. Thank you very much. Right, item number 6. To consider major plan applications received. Obviously, we're going to start with the master name application, and I will hand over to Jane at this point.
Thank you very much. If I could ask Hannah just to convert Claire Danks and Jonathan Orton across to be panellists, please. So yes, the first application we're going to discuss is number 818 on our list. The planning reference number is 2022/0616/OUT. So this is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access. for the demolition of existing outbuildings and erection of up to 150 dwellings, including affordable housing, with the provision of vehicular, cyclist and knew it would happen, pedestrian access onto Marston Lane alongside public open spaces, community space, children's play, sustainable urban drainage systems, hard and soft landscaping, infrastructure and earthworks. And as we have the applicants and agents online with us, they've kindly agreed to present the plans to us, and then following that there'll be the opportunity to ask questions. So over to Claire and Jonathan.
There we go. How's that? Thank you for that, Jane. Introduction. Can you hear me okay? And
We can.
see me okay? Thank you, Chair, as well, and thank you, councillors and members of the public that have attended this evening for the opportunity for both Claire and I to talk to you this evening about the proposals there. We do have a short presentation. I'm mindful that you seem to have quite a full agenda as well, Chair, as you mentioned earlier. So we'll try and whiz through that as quickly as we can. If there's anything people want to ask during that, then I don't know how you normally do that. Do you want to wait for questions at the end, or we'll fit in however you think is best, really? There's about 15 slides, so I think probably maybe 10 minutes. With a bit of luck, we should be done. So if I can just introduce myself first. I'm Jonathan Orton. I'm a planning director at Origin 3 in Bristol. And I'm joined this evening by my colleague Claire Danks, who hopefully you might see at the bottom of the screen there, depending on where you're pinned at the moment. And Claire is an urban designer and master planner that is working on the project with me. But just to clarify one point, Jane, the client, Gleeson Strategic Land, is not here in attendance this evening. It's just myself and Claire from the consultant side of things. So yeah, we're a planning and urban design practice based in Bristol. We work all over the country, do a lot of work in the southwest, and work with companies such as Gleeson. So it's probably an opportune time there, Claire, to start the presentation. I think we're hosting that. There we go. So just a bit of introduction as well to who Gleesons are. Gleesons have had a position on this site now for a couple of years. They are what's called a strategic land promotion company, which certainly councillors there will probably be familiar with that terminology. For members of the public that aren't, there's a difference there between a typical sort of house building business, although they do have a house building arm. But the client in this particular case is Gleeson's Land. They are a strategic land business, so they are in the business of what's called promote, or commonly referred to as promoting land through the planning process with the ultimate aim of achieving planning permission on that site in due course. And they do that up and down the country. There are various sites in the southwest. Claire and I have worked for them as a practice for 5-6 years now. And obviously working on this project as well. So they are effectively the client, they are the land promoter, and they are the people that are funding the work that's been done to date, the planning application going forward, but they are not the landowner. It's simply a position, a promotion agreement is a type of legal agreement that they have to promote that site going forward. So if we move on, Claire, to the next slide, this should be relatively straightforward. I'm sure you're all acutely aware and very familiar with the location of the site identified there on the plan, just to the west of Marston Lane. We have referred to it as land to the west of Marston Lane, and we're showing that in the context of the rest of Frome. As the presentation goes on, the slides will become more involved, if you like, around landscaping and design and access arrangements, which no doubt you will have questions on that. Just at this point, I just want to say that the key purpose of the presentation from our point of view was principally to to re-engage with the Town Council and members of the public to inform them of the progress that has been made since the last consultation events that we took part in. So back end, I think from memory, Chair, it's sort of November time, we had a presentation to the Town Council. At that point, we put up a web page. We had some, thank you, Claire, we had some leaflet distribution. I think we had about 1,000 nearby properties which were leafleted with some information about that and reference to the web page where people could find more information. And just to say, I think the returns on that were really impressive. We do these up and down the country, and I think the level of returns will probably come as no surprise to an awful lot of you there this evening. But I think we had something like 250 responses as part of that, which, and again, it probably won't come as a great surprise to a lot of people. The vast majority of those were objecting to the proposals. There was some support there about delivery of new housing, but I think it would be disingenuous of me to sit here and suggest that the vast majority of those were supportive in some way. So we, another key point I wanted to get across, as I say, the presentation is to sort of inform you about what changes have been made from where we were at that consultation process to you know what the application looks like now. It's important point, I think, here to mention that there is a vast suite of technical documentation and design documentation associated with this proposal, which went in as part of the planning application, which is accessible to members of the public on the council's webpage, clearly. There will be questions tonight that we hope to be able to answer for you as best as we can, Claire and I. We don't have the wider technical team here due to long-standing commitments and highways and drainage and things like that. If there's questions that we can't answer, we're not being obstructive there. We're more than happy to take those questions, Chair, via email to myself or to Claire and provide a more formal or written response back on any specific technical points that the members of the public or indeed the council may have. But I think the other key point I wanted to make here, we do a lot of these presentations up and down the country with parish councils, and thank you again for the opportunity, town councils, to talk to you, is I'm not here to convince people this evening about whether I'm right or we're right about the principle of development on this site, and that, you know, members of the public who have very genuine concerns are wrong. No doubt we will have very different views, I think, on the planning points of principle here, and more than happy to talk about those, obviously. We feel, as part of the team, that there is an opportunity in policy terms, both nationally and locally, to promote the site, and Gleason's are in the nature of doing that. And again, I would just point out that they are a commercial entity. A lot of the times at these events where points are put to us that, you know, this is about the pursuit of profit, and again, disingenuous of me to sit here to say that this is not, you know, an organisation that seeks a return on its investment, you know, to cover the risk through the planning process. So I hope those points are clear. It's not about convincing anybody tonight that, you know, we are right in our approach and you are wrong. I hope that we can get across to you this evening the amount of work that has gone into the proposals, and to take any sort of valid questions that members of the public might have. So, starting point in terms of planning, in our opinion, again, it comes back to our opinion, you know, we believe that the policy position where it is at the moment, both in terms of the local plan, progress on a review of that, national policy, housing land supply situations, give us the legitimacy, if you like, in policy terms to pursue what is an outline application on the site. And I don't remember who said that at the beginning, it's an important point. This is an outline application, so it's seeking to establish the principle of residential development on this site rather than the absolute specific details of fenestration and materials, and all very, very valid questions and concerns that members of the public will also have. But there's a second stage, should we, I sound presumptuous there, should we be successful in gaining planning permission, there are ongoing stages around reserved matters there, where opportunities arise again for members of the public and consultees to be involved in that process and the evolution of the more detailed design of the site. So just moving on. So, this may be familiar to a lot of people. Frome is identified as one of the principal settlements in Mendip as part of their spatial strategy, and they're part one of their local plan. There is a housing figure, an indicative housing figure identified in that plan for Frome, amongst other settlements as well. Just briefly on the planning history, this is well in advance of Claire and I's involvement in the site, or indeed Gleason's. The site was previously put forward as part of the SCHLAR process, which, again, if you're not familiar with that, there's a strategic land assessment process as part of a larger site, and it was discounted at that point. It was very much discounted on landscape grounds following assessment work that the council had done previously in 1996. So again, in the interest of being open and honest in here, I'm not trying to paint a picture of that all matters are rosy in terms of the history of the site and support for it, etc. We subsequently then got involved. I think it was early 2021, and the site was put forward then as part of a larger site assessment, as part of the housing and economic land availability assessment, which is a process which feeds into the council's local plan process. And as I mentioned earlier, we carried out a formal pre-application back in December. And again, that will come as no surprise to anyone there. I suspect that the responses on that were negative from the officers with regards to the principle of development on there and other matters, but I think it was a useful exercise for us to do. We learned quite a lot of things about the site there and people's concerns, as we did with the public consultation website and the previous presentations, and I'd like to think that we have addressed some of those, principle aside here, but we've addressed some of those technical concerns and very valid concerns that people raised and points that they've raised in the emerging proposal, or the proposal which is subject to the application now. Very briefly, I touch on it at the bottom there, and my intention was tonight not to get into detailed discussions unless anybody wishes to do so with regards to the housing land supply position, which is one of the points I mentioned earlier where we feel there is a legitimacy there about us pursuing an application on the site, but this is the council's own, what is very recently published data with regards to what they consider the position to be on the land supply side of things at the moment in Mendip. And again, Chair, I'm more than happy to talk in more detail about that at the Q&A session and what the implications of that are with regards to weight to be attached to policies, etc. So the outline application went in beginning of March. It was validated on the 3rd of March, and it is being processed by Anna Penn, is the officer that's dealing with that. The consultation responses that we're receiving are coming through thick and fast at the moment. Claire and I have literally not had a great deal of time to sort of consider those yet. So again, that's another slight hesitation in seeking to possibly to respond to some of the more technical points until we've had a chance to look at those. But again, for members of the public benefit, they are all, I understand, on the council's webpage as well as part of the application. I've taken up way too much time there, Chair, on the first slide. I hope to move things along quickly. But Claire, can we have the next one, please? So my apologies if that's taking too much time. So 2021 was the consultation master plan, which you can see there, which was the one that was on the webpage and the one that we wrote to people about. And it had a site area of about 13 hectares. The proposed number of new homes there was 180. We had allotments positioned western part of the site. And then there was a suggestion at the time around the farmhouse being developed as well. And then we'll move on to the current scheme. We made the planning application, as I say, in March. Hopefully you can see that dashed red line there adjoining the red line. The solid red line is the extent of the outline planning application. Thank you, Claire. The dashed line, well, I'm assuming that's Claire that's doing that. The dashed line was the extent of the additional land which was taken out of the consultation version of the proposals into the application, and we can talk about the reasons we did that. And you will see there the headline figures effectively is a reduction in the number of new homes being proposed here from 180 to 150. We've included an allowance in the scheme for community hub space and potentially for space for self-build housing as part of that down in that part of the site. And again, we'll come on to that in a bit more detail. There's a reduction in the site area as a result of that change in the application boundary. And the application, as I said earlier, members of the public, is accompanied by a considerable amount of technical information, one of which no doubt we will talk about this evening in terms of landscape and visual impact assessment, is a weighty tome for those of you that have a lot of time and inclination to read that. But that sets out quite clearly what our position is with regards to landscape impact arising from the development, which I suggest, I'm pretty certain will not necessarily tally with what members of the public might think of that. But I would urge people to look at that. I'd urge people to look at all elements of the application, but the landscape and visual impact assessment, transport assessments and ecological assessments are often the matters which genuinely raise the most concerns to members of the public. And as I said earlier, more than happy if there are specific technical questions that people wish to ask on those concerns, then please do contact me directly and I will provide you with a written response, or if not me, the relevant technical consultant will provide you with the written response to which hopefully may allay some of your concerns. But it is difficult because a lot of this information is written in technical terms. We try and keep it as fluid or as English as possible, but it does get quite technical at times. But by all means, please do contact us. And that's a genuine position from us and from the client on that. Moving on, Claire, thank you. So this is the submitted master plan, which is in. This is the scheme which is the subject of the current planning application. I'm going to hand over at that point, you'll be relieved to note, to my colleague Claire, that no doubt will go through the next few slides slightly more succinctly, unless, Chair, you feel it's appropriate that you want to take a pause for any questions at this point on what I've said. I'm more than happy to answer those now.
Okay, a couple of people do want to make questions. I'll ask Rich first and then come to you, Pip.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I'm Councillor Ackroyd. I just got a couple of points about the accuracy of your information. You've got at least 2 documents in that massive tome which refer to somewhere in Gloucestershire. That doesn't fill me with confidence that you are an accurate, an accurate company, to be honest. If you make mistakes like that, it smells of cut and paste. So that's not a good start. But I thought I'd point that out to you at this stage. Thanks.
Okay, can I come back on that, Chair?
Yep, please do.
Appreciate that, Councillor Ackroyd. I'm making a note of that. Would you have specific references? You're referring to the landscape visual impact analysis or the assessment in that. Clearly, we're not in Gloucestershire, so if that is the case, But I would like to think that may be my landscape colleague making reference to other projects that perhaps he's worked on recently, or where case law has been appeal decisions we often refer to. But off the top of my head, I don't know that, but I will provide you with the clarity on that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Pip first.
Thank you for your... sorry.
Thanks.
My name is Pip Hutton, and I'm a resident, and I face the proposed development. And I just want to ask you, after your very brief, lengthy introduction, that you don't waste any more time trying to gild the lily, because you won't be able to control the number of houses or the design of the houses once the planning permission is granted. So please don't waste our time or your time by doing that.
Thank you, Mr. Button. Can I come back on those 2 points, if possible? Ultimately, Mr. Button, the control of the application is with the local authority. about matters relating to design. And as I mentioned earlier, this is an outline. There are subsequent stages at reserve matters about which start to look at, and again, this is very, very presumptuous. This assumes that, outline permission is granted, but that starts to look at building typologies and designs and window treatments and building heights and all the very valid concerns that people have. So I think you can control it. You can, but by virtue of the controls which exist in the planning process and conditions on the planning permission. In terms of the numbers of housing, the description of development being applied for is up to 150 dwellings, and by virtue of that, then it is, that's what your planning permission allows for, and that's what they're the parameters that you would, whoever takes this site on in the future, should it be successful, would have to work for it. But I appreciate your concerns entirely. I do think there are controls in place in the planning. The planning system isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I've worked in it for 30 years, but I think there are opportunities with, a very, what seems to be a very well-versed civic society, a town council that has had an active role in, planning policy and, neighbourhood plans. I think there's a combination of elements there and interests that exist around Frome, in addition to the controls ultimately that the councillors and local authority have, which can control those concerns that you raise. We can talk a little bit more going forward about the approaches that we're taking to design at the outline stage, which hopefully would make that task of controlling that process and the output on the site as good as possible.
Okay. Can I ask that you go through the rest of the presentation first, and then we do the questions afterwards, because I think there's an awful lot of questions to be asked, but I think I'd like to see the presentation first, and then we can take all the questions afterwards.
Oh, that.
Sorry?
I had a question that was related to one that was asked.
Okay, one last question, then we'll see the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Sure. So sorry. So Jonathan, I'm Toby Bond. I'm a resident of Morrison Lane. I just want to say thank you for joining the meeting today. It is nice to sort of have a face to connect with the application. Am I right? You're based in Bristol?
We're based in Bristol, yeah.
Yeah. It would have been nice if you'd hopped on the train to sort of see you in person, but obviously we're in difficult times. So just a question relating to accuracy. So I've been reading your planning statement.
Right.
Page 4 of your planning statement is the conclusion of your executive summary. So if I understand it, that's the summary of the sort of overview of the application and the sort of key points that you want to make. And I'd just like to read a sentence from the final paragraph, which is, the submitted proposals offer the opportunity to contribute to the housing shortfall within Wiltshire. And I guess my question was just, why do you think a development in Frome would contribute to the housing supply in Wiltshire?
That I don't, Toby. That's an absolute inaccuracy in the statement.
Okay, thank you for confirming. I was just a bit...
Absolutely. In no way are we suggesting that, housing here in any way, impacts or, it's just not relevant.
No, it's not. Relevant. Thanks, Jonathan. If you could crack on with the presentations, I'm pretty certain there's an awful lot of questions that are going to come through afterwards, and I'd like to get through them all. Thank you.
Claire,
thank you. Thank you, Chair. I will continue now and take over the presentation. As Jonathan's already identified, on this slide in front of you is the scheme which is the subject of the planning application. The scheme proposes a reduction of numbers down to 150 homes. The application boundary area was reduced on its western extents, and as a consequence of comments made on the allotment position, they were also moved to be more contiguous to the boundary of the proposed homes. The Marston Gate farmhouse has been now shown to be retained and will remain in its current, obviously, form. It is in need of some reparation, remedial works, and those works would be carried out as part of a proposal. The scheme proposes up to 30% of the homes as affordable, which is as per the policy requirement, and it distributes more than 50% of the site over to green infrastructure uses. Public open space and play areas are integrated as part of that. Those would be the principal areas which are managed as being for recreation and play and to be accessible in the best part. The rest of the site, principally on the western side and the northern side, there is a requirement to provide bat habitat, which is suitable for foraging after dark, so it needs to have a certain light lux applied to it. So having worked with the ecologists, there is a sufficient quantum which is suitably offset from the housing and any lighting spill you may get from roads to be able to meet that requirement. The scheme also works to provide a sustainable urban drainage system, looking at surface water runoff from both surfaced areas and also the green areas, recognising it is a sloping site. There is always scope for accelerated runoff from grass in a freak event, and the system proposed would be able to capture, manage and attenuate that before discharging to existing watercourses to the west of the site. I just move on. So in terms of the submitted master, sorry, that hasn't moved on, sorry, my apologies.
Claire, I hate to interrupt, Claire, but this is an outline application, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, with all due respect, any master plan that you put up, you know, it's just indicative. It's not actually, doesn't actually mean anything, does it?
It is indicative insofar as the council would like to consider it such. If they are minded to like what is shown to them, then they can choose to ask the scheme to be more respectful of that master plan going forward in terms of the conditions. It would have to bear in mind master plan.
Okay, all right, carry on. Yeah, I just don't want to speak too long on pictures that basically and are either not going to be conditioned or are going to be changed, as you know, very, very quickly.
So in terms of there was a parameter plan which was also submitted with the application. I would expect that going forwards with an application to be one of the conditioned plans. So that set out the idea areas for development, the areas for open space. It set out the points of access, and they tally with the master plan which has been suggested. If you were moving forwards with that parameter plan, then I would expect any development to come thereafter as part of a reserve matter to comply with that parameter plan. It would be unusual to then not have regard to the master plan prepared or outlined. There would have to be a good reason, I think, to then move away from that. And in moving away so far, you may come to a point where actually you don't comply with your original outline. So, you know, I think the master plan is a good representation of what can be done with the parameter plan. When we get to the end, if it's helpful to share the parameter plan, I can do that. But if I sort of carry on with where we're at the minute. These are the access drawings which were submitted with the application. The proposal is for a primary access via an extension of Mason's Way into the site and down across the topography. In this regard, then Marston's Lane then becomes a crossroads to that junction. There are also a pair of small T-junctions set to the north of that along Marston's Lane. These would serve a small number of houses and would effectively be private drives for the main. At the very northern end, there was a pedestrian and cycle connection to Marston Lane proposed. To the south of that, opposite the Mason's Arms pub, there is a second small access that's serving again a small number of units into the former farmyard area. As you're well aware, Marston's Lane is bollard controlled partway north from this. So this area is served separately and with a pedestrian cycle connection between the two parts of the site proposed just north of the public house. Okay, within the site, on this drawing, you can see the main site entrance coming in off Mason's Way. Because of the topography, the road drops down site levels. It's shown projecting off from that then on horizontal terraces or plateaus to serve development. At the end of each of these connections, it would be possible to make pedestrian connections between those areas through the open space and back up to Marston's Lane. It would also be possible to route a cycle path along that main road that would facilitate cyclists using the road in an uphill direction, should they be travelling more slowly. It's also possible to route a cycle and footpath within the site parallel to Marston's Lane to provide an additional north-south connection. Obviously, Marston's Lane only has a footway in part, and this would give much more freedom of movement in a situation away from the existing infrastructure on Marston's Lane. On the landscape strategy, as I've noted, more than 50% of the site in this proposal is given over to green space. As noted, sort of the accessible areas, the play areas, are proposed in flatter areas. The sloping areas are then given over to natural habitat, wildlife, open space. That's not to say it wouldn't be accessible, but the access within that would then be more informal, and it would be managed for ensuring darkness during nighttime hours for the bat foraging requirements. As we've said, SUDs are down in the bottom part of the site. This proposal that is drafted here shows how the site could be terraced to deliver housing plateaus. It shows how it is possible to work with that terrain to do so. And the footprint of this and these activities corresponds with the parameter plan. So it is possible to do these actions within that zone that is identified in the parameter plan for development and change. So in the design and access statement which accompanied the application, we did include some site sections. This is just a selection of them. There are other ones that are in that document. The purpose of these were to show again how within that gross development footprint that could be broken down into development areas to show how it could work with the terrain. It also was intended to show how development on the upper parts of the site, could be set such that it was lower in height than existing properties on Marston Lane, looking at a bungalow, a single-storey solution where it faces eastwards. Because of the terrain, actually some of these properties may well end up being 2 stories on their westward face, but when perceived from Marston Lane, they would appear as a bungalow in overall height. And again, there were some additional sections produced in the document to look at the relationship between the bounding development edge to Marston Lane and the existing properties there. The scheme, and I'm sure many of the attendees this evening have probably looked at the design and access statement, but there was an intent with the way the scheme was drafted and the way the parameter plan and the master plan were drafted to show how a space could be created between the existing Marston Lane edge and the new properties. We felt there was an opportunity there to create a characterful landscaped interface between those existing and proposed homes, and look at how between the access junctions and the way that dwellings were positioned, that could create an opportunity to, in the future, develop something that was characterful and could contribute to this position. So the sections we produced, again, just gave a little microcosm of each of those situations. And again, I hope they were helpful for people living in the existing properties, just to understand that we had come forward with a proposal where we felt we could do something interesting in that location with this development scheme. So obviously there's been a couple of comments about not wanting to sort of waste time on what could be. As part of our approach with the planning application, it is to look at the character of existing properties and look at Frome. It is to also suggest different architectural styles, how they may respond to the context, how they may respond to the wider sort of materiality of it. So these sketches were to produce to show how a traditional built form, so something with a pitched roof, can be integrated into that proposal. It was also to demonstrate how, when looking at orientation and working with the terrain, what that may mean for properties on there. It would have been sort of disingenuous to show a more standard housing estate, because something like that is not necessarily going to be a fit with a proposal like this. It does need to be something that would be particular to its site proposal. So I will sort of flash through these sketches, but that was sort of our main intent, to show that there were different character areas. So you had a site entrance, you had the farmyard area, you had the middle terrace of the site, which is essentially the main housing spine through there. And then you had an edge, which was the meadow edge at the bottom overlooking the suds basins. All of that information was contained within the design and access statement. And again, I'm sure many people have looked at it and understand your comments about whether that is something that you can really fix at this stage. We feel it's something that could come out of that proposal. It is something that could come forward from that parameter plan, and it gives a hint of what opportunities that site could create if that application were discussed and considered. And obviously long term, if something like that were to happen, then there would obviously be iteration and informed discussion with various bodies within the authority and within the local community. And this was our starting point. So if I just move on to the final slide and just hand back to Jonathan.
Great. Thank you, Claire. Jonathan, I think we need to go to questions now.
Oh, absolutely, Chair.
If that's okay with you. And first I'm going to ask Jeremy over in the corner there to start us off.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman and councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm a resident of Frome, and obviously there are lots of others here, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just urge you as councillors to object to the planning application. It is an outline application. All the stuff about community hub, self-build and the lovely urban design are irrelevant to this application at this stage. It's about the principle of development, and I appreciate Jonathan said that the application is up to 150, but once the principle of development is established, that doesn't stop. In fact, that gives a good precedent for another application which will seek to intensify the development. And I'm not being cynical, just being very practical about what we're dealing with here. I think the application is contrary to the intentions and the objectives and the policies of the local development framework in its entirety, which we as a community and you as a town council have worked with Mendip on over a number of years to establish, which is based on landscape assessments, infrastructure capacity assessments and so on and so forth. This site was deliberately excluded from the local plan from the call for sites. This site was put forward but not taken forward. The applicant is working on the basis of something to do with the 5-year land supply, which is a technicality, an important technicality in national government policy, but it all hinges on the fact that it's a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and I would contest that this is not sustainable development. And that it's unsubstantiated sustainable development. So the applicant says in the planning statement at 5.8 that it will benefit economic growth through added expenditure, but there's nowhere in any of the suite of documents that justifies how much that is or why that is, and therefore why it should outweigh the development plan policies. That's just one example. And it doesn't either say why this site and why not many of the other sites in Frome. And it doesn't also pay sufficient attention to the MPPF or the local plan in its entirety on design matters, on landscape matters, on traffic matters, and so on and so forth. And I know from a site-specific point of view, this is the wrong site. It's a very significant landscape. In infrastructure terms, it's quite peripheral. I know the applicants put up a map and shown some of the facilities of Frome, but our secondary school is on the other side of Frome. And the traffic issues that would arise along Marston Lane and Marston Road would be really significant. And we all know as local people that those roads are constrained. And so I do also think there is another very technical issue to do with nutrient neutrality across Mendip and why Frome is having to take its unfair share, but I don't think that's really the point for this meeting, and I think you should hear from others. But I would just urge you to object to Mendip. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeremy. Jonathan, I don't know if you want to come back on any of that.
Jeremy, thank you. There's a lot to come back on, Chair. I said at the beginning, I think we weren't anticipating that we were going to reach a resolution on interpretation of policy in the development plan tonight. We do have a view on the passage of time of the local plan. Its conformity with what we've had now, certainly 2, possibly 3 newer iterations of MPPF. The 5-year. I'd just like to make the point. The 5-year position is a part of the argument, but I think there's other parts to it, the justification for housing here in terms of affordable housing, addressing need. Frome is identified as a key settlement. The spatial strategy does talk about quite a significant amount of growth at Frome. We've got a local plan which, for want of a better phrase, seems to have paused now, pending unitary status, and that's not criticism, Chair, of anyone. There's an awful lot going on there, but we feel that there is a somewhat of a policy lapse, if you like, or vacuum of things have not caught up in terms of the review of a plan which was adopted as long ago as 2014.
Right. I don't really want to get into the whole policy tonight. I think that's something that we can do later, because I know there's lots of residents here that want to ask questions.
Yeah. Do you want me to pick up any of the other points that Jerry's made? Because I think they're all.
But okay.
Clearly, sort of valid points. It was excluded from that plan, as he rightly points out, from the Schlar process back in 2013. But I'd reiterate what I said. It was part of a much wider, a much larger parcel of land which was put forward and which impinged, if you like, or contravened I think it was the 1996 landscape strategy work, which was subsequently updated as opposed to this specific site. We feel that the site is well located in terms of its proximity to services and facilities. I hear what he's said there. And the final point, I think, Jeremy, apologies if I missed any of them. By all means, drop me an email. The nutrient neutrality point will be a point which is very, very evident to residents. And again, with the advice of our drainage consultants, we're comfortable that we're not caught by that, and that may well, Jeremy, translate into additional political pressure about more housing at Frome and indeed other locations which are outside of those catchments, and I'm sure that is the case.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan. Right, I'm going to start with other questions. Now, I promised Mark to have first question some time ago, so he's going to go first. For the rest, and then we'll do other questions. I'm sure a lot of you have got similar questions. All I would say is I want to get through all the questions that we can. I don't want anyone to go home feeling that they haven't had a chance to speak. But if your particular point has been raised before, just let us know that your point's been raised before, and then we can move on to somebody else. But I do want to make sure that everyone gets the opportunity to say something. So I'll pass over to Mark now.
Thanks, Steve. Mr. Orton, thanks for coming, albeit virtually. You remember at the pre-application meeting we held confidentially in November with you, I invited you to come to this hall to meet local residents so you could see the strength of feeling that is certainly here tonight. I also asked you to send letters to residents who would be otherwise digitally excluded from the consultation you carried out. I'm glad you saw that, saw to see to doing that, even though the response perhaps wasn't the one you wanted. I'm not in any elections next week, so all the points I'm going to make tonight are not politically motivated whatsoever. I'm not asking for a vote. So these are purely as my role as the town councillor and as a very concerned resident for Frome. This application is just the latest in a series made by developers and agents who don't know our town and don't know the issues we face. The minutes we just signed from the last meeting, there was a similar application there for 96 houses on a piece of land at Innox Hill that's already been turned down 4 times, but people keep coming back. Developers and agents across the country have seen in the papers that Frome is the best place to live in the UK and want to cash in. They look on Google Maps, see some green fields, approach a landowner with, we'll give you 10 times how much your land is worth. If you come with us, we'll get the planning permission for you. There doesn't seem to be any care that the town is already overdeveloped. We can't get doctor's appointments. There's no NHS dentist in the town that's taking applications at the moment. And so the very reasons that Frome is the best place in the world to live are being destroyed by these developments. So the golden goose is being killed. I know Mr. Orton will say that they will provide Section 106 agreements to mitigate against the points I've just raised, but those take a long time to come through, if they come through at all, and they get varied and diminished. The indicative plan for the buildings is indicative. It's not, so we have pictures of houses, green fields, nature reserves. The nature reserves are attenuation ponds because the tarmacking and concreting of the green fields will provide runoff. That'll run down into the bottom of the hill, into what's been called a nature reserve, but in fact will turn into a bit of a fetid swamp. And so the area is already a nature reserve. It's green fields. We don't need to build on it. Talking about we'll give you 50% of green space. We've already got 100% of green space. Why do we need to build another 50%? So if you look at Gleeson Lands, your client, look at their website, the front page. Gleeson specialises in both building low-cost homes in the north of England and the Midlands and land promotion in the south of England, which is us, so we're not going to build affordable homes here. We enter into mutually beneficial agreements with landowners to promote their land through the planning process. Land planning technical experts guide the sites through the planning process to achieve a deliverable and valuable planning consent. We deliver best value for landowners through the sale of their land with the benefit of an implementable planning permission. So there is no intention to develop the site as per this application, so it was a waste of time looking at the pictures that have been drawn. But it will be sold on to the highest bidder. They will vary the conditions to put on as many houses as they can get away with. Our experience shown they will then chip away at the affordable social element of any development. And they do a viability assessment and say they cannot make sufficient profit. So that's what we think will happen to this, because it's happened at various other sites around the town. Why should this be any different? And our friend here raised the point about this is going to help the housing problem in Wiltshire. That was the point a question I was going to raise with Mr. Orton. Thank you for pointing that already. I just think that's probably indicative of what's been described as a cut and paste application. This has been done all over the country, anywhere they can get away with it. Therefore, I think you can see that I'm going to object to this in strongest terms, and I hope the rest of the committee will.
Thank you, Mark. I don't know if you want to come back on any of that, Jonathan, quickly.
I'm going to have to, Chair, I'm afraid. I mean, I'd take some exception. Thank you, Councillor, anyway. Take some exception to the, hands in the air about the Wiltshire thing. I don't think that means it's a cut and paste application. I think, the sums of money invested in this to put together are significant. And there are an array of land promotion companies that have just been adequately described by the councillor then, up and down the country, that have appalling reputations about their approach to the planning process. And I don't think this is one of them, having worked with them for 5 or 6 years. I think they're a good company that does try and do it properly and do it well. I totally appreciate your concerns about what happens at the later stages, and I can't sit here and vouch for whoever ends up buying that site, what their commercial drivers or the strategies might be about reductions in Section 106s and stuff like that. But that's certainly not on Gleeson's agenda when they're trying to gain planning permission. We've been entirely compliant about policy compliant about the level of affordable housing and speaking to education and contributions, as you rightly say, in the Section 106 agreement. So they do build houses in the north of the country, as I alluded to at the start of the president. But this is the promotion side of it. So I think your points are very valid based on my experience as well. Not of this client, I hasten to add, but my experience of the planning process over the last 30 years. Of things, applications being changed and permissions being changed. So absolutely take that. I don't think that's the case here. I think they'll want to, whoever the site is sold to, and it is a commercial operation, as I mentioned. There's no hidden agenda there. But I think the way that is controlled contractually between Gleeson's and whoever purchases it is pretty stipulating about what they can and can't do. But I certainly can't sit here, Chair, and vouch that, you know, whoever does buy that in the future won't be knocking on your door in 2, 3, 4 years' time to say, I want to change it or I want to increase the numbers. I don't know that. But I would just come back. I think, you know, we've worked hard on this application. There's a good technical team around it. You know, we as a practice are not in the habit of making, you know, rogue applications or applications which aren't robust. Nor is the client in this particular case.
Okay. Thanks, Jonathan. Right, I've got Damon first and then the gentleman at the back after that. Okay.
Thanks very much, Jonathan and Claire. My name's Damon Hooton. I'm one of the district councillors for the ward that's for Froome Park ward. And just for your information, I also chair the planning board. So you will be coming before me at some point. If it's within the next 11 months, that's for sure. A lot of the points, actually, Mark has made a lot of the points. I'm not going to try and outdo Jeremy Smalley because what he's done is actually quite detailed, and also John Peverley, his comments as well. So I'm not going to try and do those. What does concern me about this, though, is part of the planning process means that you're only able to deal with this particular site, whereas actually what is frequently ignored in the planning process is the cumulative impact of highways. For one, here you're mentioning Marston Lane and Marston Road, but let's not, those of us here who know, that leads on to the Butts and trying to get into the town centre, and we're trying to shove at the moment a disproportionate amount of traffic down that road. This is going to exacerbate that problem. It's a skyline site. So there are some staggering views from Marston Lane across open countryside. But of course, the reverse of that is if you're across the other side of the countryside, that you're looking towards Froome, and it's quite a nice little view, actually, and it will be ruined, absolutely ruined, by a housing development that will blot on the landscape. Is probably a bit harsh, but actually it's what I think. You've got light pollution, and for those of us who do occasionally come in from Buckland Dinham, you can see what the Lay Vale estate has done to that skyline as well. So it's so there is precedent, unfortunately, for unfortunate developments. I'm concerned about the hedgerow. There's a sizable trunk of hedgerow along Marston Lane that is likely to be removed. There's no easing of my concern over that. I'm actually going to. I'm probably better off leaving it there because I'm getting quite annoyed actually.
Right. Thanks very much, Damon. If you want to reply to any of that, Jonathan, it's.
I think that was. Thank you, David. I think that was pretty unequivocal, really. There's in terms of what your position is on it. I mean, I'd just say it's a good point about the cumulative impact. Froome is a desirable location to be from a developer's point of view. We're not talking about policy now, but there's an argument there as to whether it was planned, the policy was correct way back in 2013, where it should be now. Any development on greenfield sites, there is pressure on greenfield sites up and down the country, is going to have an urbanising effect of some sort. And we think we've weighed that in terms of landscape impact terms, and undoubtedly, our landscape evidence will no doubt be different than the council's landscape evidence on this as well, and that's very normal. But we think it's moderated. We've not gone further. We think the scheme has been reduced. It's significantly smaller than the scheme that was about, or the site that was advanced back in 2013. But it is going to have an impact, absolutely, an urbanising impact. It does have a traffic impact as well. We think that's managed. We think that's balanced. Now, that's clearly not what local residents are going to think, but we think technically it's justifiable. But it will have an impact, and I'm acutely aware that you are as councillors and as a council as a town as well. Somebody described it earlier. I think said under the cosh of under pressure from development, and I think that is an indication of it being a desirable location to be from a developer's point of view, where there's a strong market and where we think housing need exists.
Well, I think we'll disagree on the desirable. I've got the gentleman at the back and then Pip at the front. Sorry.
Whilst I'm actually walking the microphone round there, you also need to know that you've got it wrong on the local plan. Local plan part 2 was adopted in December last year.
Yes, I was aware of that.
Sir.
Hi there, Mike Bryce, resident at Marston Lane. Looking at it from a different aspect, the business side of things, having been involved in building and development for, 30 years, like sort of looking at how the site's going to be developed with its unique issues, terracing, infrastructure and stuff like that. The cost of it won't be borne by 150 houses. So you're looking at beyond 150 houses once the plans are, if they're agreed, because 150 houses will not give the return that a developer is looking at with its specific requirements. It's simply not going to happen unless you can figure out a way of drastically reducing the cost of building houses. It simply won't stand it. So you just know that beyond that application for 150, they're going to have to maximise it to generate the return that they're going to be looking for. So looking at from that perspective, you can fluff it up and say that there's constraints and that they won't come back, or you can't guarantee that they won't come back, but they will come back, and that's the long and the short of it.
Thank you.
I've been involved in it for 30 years, so I know the way that it's going to go.
Yeah.
So, you can dance around it, the site with 150 houses, with the cost, with the specific individual processes it's going to have to go through to mitigate the impact, also, and the terracing and all the things that go with it. It's not going to work with 150 houses, especially with 30% being affordable housing.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Mr. Bryce. Thank you. It's an interesting point, Jonathan. You probably can't raise it because you probably haven't done the numbers yet.
Well, we have. Yeah, I mean, there's clearly people have gone into this. I'm not. It's above my pay grade, Chair, to start talking about that here, I'm afraid. But I mean, Gleeson's the machine behind it, and I've clearly looked at this, and we believe, the level of infrastructure that's going to be required and costs, and when you factor in all the other things, land prices, then it's still a viable proposition to do to carry forward. But I mean, clearly, we're going to disagree on that.
Absolutely. Nikki.
Yes, hello, Jonathan. I'm Nikki Fleming, one of the residents in Marston Lane, and thank you for appearing, albeit virtually this evening. I think what Steve has enabled you to do is to show us the plans that we've all seen and the photographs and the pictures that we've all seen, and that clearly on an initial response, your company has undergone a little bit of mitigation. But actually that's, I find as a resident, utterly irrelevant at this stage because it is an outline planning application. And one of the things I'd like to ask you, please, is at what stage do you ask, or does the company Gleeson's ask the opinions of the local residents and the local community before writing a report that say there isn't an issue with the traffic, or that there won't be a problem with the environmental issues, or that there won't be a problem with the drainage? It's just the local residents of Frome, and particularly this area, are very well informed of the issues. So my question to you is, at what point do you start asking us questions as experts in the area?
Thank you. So, Vicky, sorry, Vicky, I misheard it. Was it Vicky or Nikki? My apologies.
Nikki. It's Nikki.
Nikki, thank you. Thank you. Well, we put up the slide at the beginning about some of the consultation that we did at pre-submission stage and the web page as well. So there's an element of that done before proposals become formalised as an application, and that's been a couple of years in the gestation. In this particular case, I mentioned at the beginning as well, the site was put forward in 2013 into the process. At the time, the local plan, but obviously came out the other side rather sharpish then. And then, Gleeson's haven't had any further involvement in that site till, I think, 2020. ordinarily what happens, in an ideal world, there's an evolution of policy through the local plan which supports a site, and therefore, the next stage is then making a planning application. They're very early stages when members of the public, do become involved at a policy, framing the policy for a town or for an area at those early stages of the plan. But that hasn't happened here because, and I don't know why that hasn't, because we weren't involved in 2013 up until 2021. But I think all of the points you raised there, concerns about drainage, about highways, landscape impact that people have talked about, are all very valid. In the defence of Gleeson's, nobody wakes up one morning and thinks they're going to spend a considerable amount of money on making a planning application on a greenfield site which isn't allocated. There's an awful lot of due diligence done on the technical side of things before people feel confident enough to come and talk to members of the public. And again, I'm not here to convince you that your concerns with drainage are allayed by what one of our technical consultants may or may not say. But there is a lot that goes into that to satisfy ourselves that technically the site works and the impacts are acceptable or manageable. They're never going to be negligent. There's always going to be an impact. And I think at Gleeson's again, I could point to an awful lot of sites that Gleeson's are involved in up and down the country at the moment, where they are involved much earlier in the plan making process, where there is a great degree of public consultation years before they make a decision on making a planning application. And this is just a case where they have taken on this site at a time when the policy for Frome has moved on a little bit, or it's quite historic. Unfortunately, we're in a position where it doesn't appear that anything's going to happen in the near future about a review of that local plan that was promised on a couple of occasions because of the...
Jonathan, I think Nikki was asking when you're actually going to consult with the residents.
Yes, you're not actually answering my question. I'm really sorry. I know you're trying to hard to, but you do sound really like you're doing a Boris Johnson on us and actually not answering the question, which was when and at what stage in this process were any of the local residents consulted about anything? I'm not so much about the drainage, because obviously that's not our area of expertise, but we do see the fields flooding. But this is really about when we looked at the reports, and everyone has done, in terms of the impact of the traffic. It was undertaken with a very narrow section of the road on a very quiet part of the day, when everybody knows that the reality is completely different to that. And also the environmental impact. There's no mention of the fact that there are grass snakes there, for example. There's no mention of protected species existing. So, at what point was the environmental impact going to involve the local residents who bear witness to the existence of these endangered species?
Well, I forgive me if I'm sounding like Boris Johnson. I don't intend to do, but I mean, I mentioned we did a mail shot of 1,000 houses. With letters went out. We've had a web page. We have engaged in a pre-submission process. The application is live with the local authority. That there's an obligation on the local authority to send notify people of that as well. So I think we have done what we could reasonably do and what was possible to do. I mean, I think, can I ask the question that if we were to come and ask members of the public in a forum like this about whether or not they felt that any development should take place on that site 2-3 years ago, I'm pretty certain the answer to that would have been no.
As it is today.
As it is today.
Hasn't really changed, no.
It hasn't really changed.
Probably got even stronger, with all due respect. Right, any more questions? Richard. Richard, I'll do members of the public first and then come on to councillors. And the gentleman next.
Is this on? Yeah. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councillor Richard Pinnock. I'm one of the other councillors for Park Ward in Frome. Just encourage the Frome Town councillors to oppose this planning application. I think in the non-answer to Nikki Fleming's question, I think it did become quite clear that this is a speculative planning application. Damon and I have spoken to a majority of the residents at Marston Lane personally, and they're a well-informed group of individuals who've got lived experience of that area. Now, I'm not on the planning committee. I'm not used to sort of like the technical language, and I just really appreciate some simple answers to some really simple questions. There's just two of them. The first is this site within the development limits of Frome? And then the second question is, will if houses are built on this site, will it increase traffic on Marston Lane?
Okay, thank you. Answer the first one, no, it's not.
Thank you.
Answer to the second one. There will be an increase.
You said answer to both, sorry.
Sorry. There will be an increase in traffic on Marston Lane.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a given.
Gentleman here. Sorry, he's after. Sorry. He's a councillor.
Thank you very much. And just as I was about to ask my question, I've written down, my laptop ran out of battery, so fortunately I took a photo of my question. I'd say thank you for agreeing to answer questions by email. If you're not able to answer them today, that's really appreciated. And I would, if you're not able to answer these questions today, very much appreciate an answer by email. My first question is, are you or your client aware of the long history of the site being widely used for public recreation?
For public recreation, I'm aware that there are dog walkers on, it's used for dog walking, but I'm not entirely certain that's with the status of that. There's public rights of way or public accessibility to it.
So, and school children using it after school and people flying kites and all that sort of. So you and your clients are aware that it is used for that purpose and has been for a long time?
I understand that it is being used by the public, but as I say, the status of that, I'm not, unless you tell me otherwise, I'm not certain that's with any, rights of way across that.
Sure, so thank you. So my second question is, have you or your client encouraged the landowner or the tenant to block public access to the site?
Well, certainly not me, and I'd be very, very surprised. I missed your name at the beginning, my apologies. I'd be very surprised if that was any suggestion from my client about that.
It is just very interesting that public access has very recently been blocked to the site by dragging large trees in front of the public access ways and of locking up a gate which has been open for many, many years, which coincidentally coincides with this outline planning application. So I would be appreciate an answer by email as to whether your client or you have engaged with the landowner.
I don't think you need an email response from me. I'm telling you that's got nothing to do with us as a practice or nothing to do with our client. And we just clarify on public access ways? What do you mean by that? Where are they?
So where you are proposing changing the direction of the road at where the sharp bend, there is a gap in the hedge there, which has been used for many, many years for people walking dogs and accessing that field. That has very recently been blocked by moving a large tree, cut down tree in front of it. Right. It's interesting you say that you've not engaged with landowner. It's coincidental. It's never happened before, but it's happened when there's an outline planning application.
Okay. I'll take that point. But as I say, I think I'd reiterate, I don't believe there's public rights through there, but I'm happy to be proven wrong on that.
When I'm being told by the 25 years that's been there, at least.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you for that. Rich, did you want to?
Yeah, Councillor Ackroyd again. Sorry, I just wanted to make a couple of points. I've just been looking at Mendip's planning portal. There are actually 66 comments from members of the public. It says officially 64 of those are objections. One is in support. I can't find that one in support. And there's one neutral. I found that one, and it's an ironic reply. It's clearly an objection. So basically, you've got 65 out of 66 against you, and there are an awful lot more people in this town, I guess, who will also object. I'm just pointing that out. I'm going to bounce it back to Mendip councillors and say, I hope that you object to this planning application, and Damon in particular as chair, I hope that you chair that meeting and have a chair's vote.
I won't be chairing it, Richard.
Well,
I've predetermined myself.
Well, I think you're entitled to an opinion. I think you should be stronger than that, Damon, and I think you should chair that meeting and chair it fairly, allow all points of view, but at the end you have a vote, you have an opinion, and I think you should put it as the chair in case, as has happened before, we get a split decision and the chair votes the wrong way. So I'm saying that, Damon, that's what you're there for. You live in Frome, do it.
Okay. Thank you. Pip, you need a microphone. So.
I think it's fair to say, Rich, on the answer, because I've been named, Steve,
okay.
I have actually made my views very, very clear on this one. Very, very clear.
All right, thank you.
Yes, hello. My name's Pip. I'm a resident. I spoke earlier and asked you not to try and gild your lily too much. And I'm very interested in the language you've been using. And I was interested to hear you say that due diligence, a lot of due diligence has been taken part in order to prove that you can make some money out of it. I'm also interested in all of Claire's presentation, which used words like can or could, or propose. It has interesting possibilities. These are all so flaky. Everything about this proposal, apart from the desire to get outline planning permission, is incredibly flaky. It has no substance and no value to the town at all.
Thank you, Pip. Thanks for that. Yeah, sir, please carry on.
Yeah, I'm Peter Beard. I live at the northern end of that site plan. I've overlooked that lane for 40 years. In all that time, those fields have been allocated on the town plan as a preserved rural landscape for everybody to enjoy. And nothing has changed now, except the government have told people that they've got to build more houses. And there's now government pressure. This allows profiteers like Gleeson's to make money by trying to build over our green landscapes. We've got to ask ourselves, what will Frome gain from this? The only thing is more cars, more people clogging up the facilities. It means that the health service, the health centre, I should say, is always already overloaded. The dental services are overloaded. The recycling centre and all our roads. You can't drive down Weymouth Road. You can't drive down Nunney Road. The whole town will just become overloaded. The only thing this is for is to make money for Gleeson's.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Don't suppose you can come back on that much, Jonathan. I mean,
Well, I did make it clear, Chair, at the beginning. This is a commercial entity, commercial operation, and it's pursuing a profit like anybody else in other businesses. And
okay, we're going to hear from some more people.
Sorry.
Any more questions, gentlemen at the back?
Good evening, everybody. I live on Marston Lane at the main access point to the new development or proposed development. Can I ask, Jonathan, your company is contracted to Gleeson's to do this outline planning. Do you get paid a bonus if it gets through, or do you just get a flat rate like normal people would get?
I can answer that. We're a business as well. We have a fee structure in place with Gleeson's, which pays for mine and Claire's time on these projects, as do the other consultants. I mean, that's perfectly normal. Unless I've missed something, I'm not involved in any bonus arrangements as a result.
Okay.
Win lose or draw here. I'm not. That does happen. That does happen, absolutely. But we're not in that position on this site. We're paid by Gleeson's to do the as are the other consultants.
I'm just trying to gather why a northern company like Gleeson's would want to employ a local or semi-local company like yours.
Sorry.
Okay, so once these 150 houses are built, is there a plan for you then to get the next contract to go all the way to Nunny and build Northern Town, like Blackburn or Bury in Somerset? Which is what you're proposing.
It's an interesting concept, that, but it's not. It's certainly not something that we are involved with or under instruction to look at additional land. Or we're not. And just on the Gleason's point, I mean, our client's based in Hampshire, which is their office, and that's entirely normal practice where promoters or developers may well use local consultancies, to understand the patch a little bit better, perhaps, than people that are off patch, or the local plan, or the politics, or that's pretty normal. So I don't.
Right, thanks, Jonathan. This lady here wanted to say something. I think if there's a microphone. Lady at the front, Damon.
Thank you. My name is Rachel White. I'm also a resident on Marston Lane. Thank you, Jonathan and Claire, for your presentation. I don't want to dwell on the issue of sloppiness, as that's already been raised by two people already, but it really doesn't bode well when your presentation, Claire, refers to it as Marston's Lane throughout and then Marston Lane in other places. I mean, quite frankly, it's a bit of an insult, and I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other comments? The gentleman at the back here. Damon.
Yes, good evening. Kevin Barnes. I don't live on Marston Lane. We live in Yeoman's Lodge. So we would have the pleasure of looking at this proposed development. And to me, I've lived in Frome all my life. The building line is quite clear, has been clear for many years, that this is an amenity that we should not lose and cannot lose at any cost. We, as current residents, have the responsibility to look after it for future generations. And I find this whole process and this application quite insulting for the various reasons been raised today, both technical and from the consultation part of it. It's clear about making money. It's quite obvious that's what it's all about. And so I would also stress, thank you, Mark, good points made, that this should be objected to, and it certainly just cannot proceed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Gentleman at the front.
You keep me on my toes.
Yeah, sorry. Good for you,
very much. David Peacock, live on Marston Lane, almost opposite where the new access is going to be. You may be just giving the new residents another challenge to get round the bend at the fastest speed that they can possibly make it. We've seen several cars in the hedges over the years, and you've shown a new access with another bend which will extend the challenge. So I think from a highways point of view, that is unacceptable.
Thanks very much. Any other questions in the council?
Which one would they're both the question about the same time?
All right, go left and then right.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I live on Marston Lane. Can I just be assured by tonight that the Frome Town Council will be supporting us in objecting?
I think it's a great idea.
We will take a vote at the end of the discussion, and yeah, but I think you probably can see which way it's going.
Yes, my name is Tim Painter. I've lived on Marston Lane since 1994, in fact. Just a quick question to you, Jonathan. You've reduced the amount of houses from 180 when we had the original leaflet put through the door down to 150. Can you clarify exactly why that was?
Yeah, that might be Claire. Do you want to explain that in a bit more technical terms?
Yes, so we obviously took away that people were concerned about the impact of the development proposal. So we looked with Gleason's at a smaller scheme, looking to basically just reduce the impacts, reduce the number of cars generated overall, generally just to reduce that scheme to be a smaller scheme on the site.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
One other thing, I would put it to you that you didn't seek any of the residents, what they had to say about it beforehand, because you knew this was going to be very contentious.
I think we have, as I say, we have put it out there, or Gleason's have put it out there prior to making an application. I think it's very evident from tonight's discussion that the vast majority, and I thank the gentleman for the statistics, the current statistics, are opposed to the principle of it altogether, and often that leads to no engagement whatsoever, or no willingness to engage in matters of detail, if that's the starting point. And that's not criticism. That is not a criticism at all. And therefore, the ability to sort of engage with near neighbours or local communities on matters of design it is much harder. I mean, Claire and I do these up and down the country, and some areas are keen that people want to get involved with a blank piece of paper and start drawing where the roads go and where the houses are. That's not the situation here, for the very valid reasons that people have given us tonight. So,
thanks. Thank you. Any more questions? Or we'll go on to councillors.
Oh, I think that.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm allowed to ask another one. Sorry, this will be my last question, as I'm hogging the mic slightly. It's a question for Claire. I've been looking at the visual impact assessment and trying to understand the mitigations to the view, both looking up the slope and down the slope. My understanding of the primary mitigation looking up the slope is just to hide the buildings behind some trees. Is that effectively correct? That's one of the main mitigations, is planting some trees.
Yes, the mitigation is to introduce planting on those slopes to filter the views of the houses. It's not possible to hide the houses. So the advice given by the person undertaking the landscape impact assessment was to then look at a pattern of terraces of houses, i.e. terraces on a slope, not terraces necessarily built form, with layers of planting to then integrate those homes onto that sloped position.
Thank you. So it's effectively just to hide it behind some trees.
I don't think hiding is quite the right word. I don't think we would ever suggest that you will be hiding this scheme. It is just to soften and filter that. But on the understanding that, yes, you will be able to see those homes.
No, thank you. In terms of the mitigation looking down the slope, I mean, people have already discussed the sort of outstanding view of the area, the sort of unbroken views towards the west, and that's recognised in the sort of landscape visual assessment. My understanding of the primary mitigation for that is to introduce 3 specific viewpoints at which those views can still be observed. One at the to the south of the site, one in the middle, and one at the north, and some glimpsed views as you travel along Marston Lane. So we're replacing an unbroken open view with 3 specific viewing points. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so thank you. So
Thanks. Right.
I made my point.
I've got John here.
John Nelson, I'm Councillor for Park Ward, where this is located, and I object strongly to this application. I think there is a sort of majority, and at the beginning we noted that a number of us are stepping down from the Planning Committee, but I feel confident that the sustained objection, unanimous, I'm guessing, will continue with the new councillors as well. So I'm just putting that on the table so you understand the level of objection, because we're listening to residents. It's the eloquence of the residents here which make it clear why this is unacceptable.
Thank you, John. Anything else? Right, I'm going to have my comments, Jonathan. I mean, I think this is everything that's wrong with planning at the moment, as far as I'm concerned. It's utterly and totally speculative, from what I can see. If Gleason were really keen on doing a development on this site, they would have put a full application in, not an outline application. As various people have picked up, there's so many errors in the outline application that you have to wonder exactly how much time and effort has gone into it. You say you put a lot in. Unfortunately, it hasn't been proofread for a start. There's nothing in there that gives anything for the town, as far as I'm concerned. It's just a pure money grabbing, take option with nothing giving back. And to come at us with a master plan, we've all seen those before on an outline, and we know very, very well that by the time it comes to reserve matters, that all changes. Could maybe look this way. Doesn't really cut a great deal of ice anymore here in Frome. We've seen it so many times. So all I would say is that I think, I'm very much going to object to this, and if Gleeson are really, really serious about it, then they should put the money, time and effort into putting a full application in. That's my view. And I think at that point we'll take a vote. So.
Do you want me to?
Oh, yeah, okay, Jane's going to summarise all the comments.
I'm going to do the boring technical.
And then we will take a vote.
Yes, so clearly councillors are going to object. So I just want to explain briefly what our objection will be based on. So clearly we will be objecting against policy. I won't go through all those policies. They've all been set out by other people in their responses before. But, you know, we will be referring to the local plan policy, our neighbourhood plan policies, and also our town design statement, which makes a big thing about the landscape views and impacts across the valley there. So yes, it is outside the development limit. Yes, we've heard the argument about the 5-year land supply, but is it sustainable? I don't think that we believe that it is, and obviously I'll go into the reasons why we feel that. We're also very concerned about the traffic and highways impacts, the impacts that it will have on wildlife and habitat. Not something that's actually been mentioned, but you know, we really would like to see much more detail about active green travel throughout the site and how all that would link together. The play areas in the community hub, I don't believe that they are we don't believe that they are integrated. There's concerns about the drainage, and we realise that an outline process is the obvious choice for the applicants, but you know, to really properly assess this application, it should be a full application. And there was a mention about affordable housing. You know, that this development would bring affordable housing. And I think we'd need to think about the balance. You know, does the provision of that affordable housing outweigh the harm that this would have on the surrounding area? So that's a very brief summary of what our injection will contain.
Thank you, Jane, for that. It's Chair, can I finish up from our side then? Is that appropriate?
Beg your pardon?
Can I finish up from our side then? Is that appropriate?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you again for everybody's time. Appreciate that. Appreciate the sentiment and the feeling around the proposals that's been put forward eloquently by members of the public and councillors themselves. The summary was very useful there, Jane. One thing, it's the first time we've mentioned it really about what the benefits from housing are from this proposal, to be honest. So it's nice to sort of hear that amidst all the negativity about landscape impacts and stuff. This delivers or would deliver much needed affordable housing in a settlement. It helps to address need for younger families. These are all matters which, you know, we haven't talked about tonight, and that we haven't talked about that tonight because we've been listening to people's technical concerns. But I think it's a really important point to finish with about there are merits, there are benefits to delivering housing in this location, and you know, the wider location in the country generally, in like the housing crisis we're in at the moment. But we, you know, will reserve views on you know, interpretation of the policy, as I said, going forward. I'd like to come back on the point about not attending in person this evening. That was a timing point. We've been inundated with COVID cases, as I'm sure other people have as well. So there's been a willingness to come and see you as opposed to not coming to see you. But due to prior engagements, that's not been possible, and people with COVID as well. So my apologies. My apologies if there has been a typo or two or a reference to you know, Wiltshire in there. But I don't think the merits of this proposal, you know, should be judged, or you know, or the extent to which Gleesons have thought about this should be judged on whether or not we've made reference to, you know, a missing S from the name of a lane, for instance, or you know, I don't think that is a reflection on the quality of the work that's been put together and the quality of Gleesons as a promoter. But I understand people's concerns about promoters generally. So that's probably enough for us, and apologies if we've taken up too much time.
Thank you.
To vote now.
I think on that point we'll vote, please. So if someone could propose Jane's objection, please. Thank you, Mark. Someone second. Thank you, Rich. There we are. Thank you very much. That's carried unanimously. So thank you, Jonathan, Claire. Yeah, I think you can sense the depth of feeling from the room here tonight, and hopefully you can take that back to Cleaton.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Don't forget, you've got to do this, folks, again at Mendip, all right? Because they're the planning authority.
I think it's safe to say, I don't know, it depends on how long the process takes. Sorry. It all depends on how long the process takes. It can be a couple of months, it could be 6 months, we don't know. It all depends on the questions that Gleeson's or the agents will be asked, and the consultees like highways, education, the town council clearly are going to do this. All the statutory consultees will need to be asked the questions, have their responses come in. They will then need to be assessed. A report will need to be written, and then it will be submitted to the board. It's not going to be quick. It's not going to be next week, next month. It's going to be a few months away. I think it's safe to say. Because Richard and I have given you a promise as we've been coming round to keep you advised. We're on this one really big style, and we'll keep you advised.
Can I just add to that? If you have written in response to this application, you will be notified by Mendip the date when it's going toward before the planning board. So you will be aware.
Can I just add to that? The planning site of Mendip, you can actually register on that, say this is a planning application that I'm tracking.
Yeah.
You will then get emails updating you.
Absolutely.
As it goes through the various
As Jane has already said, those who have actually registered their comments on there already will automatically be advised. Yeah. But anybody else who wants to do, who hasn't submitted a comment, please do.
Please do, yeah.
You know, that's fine. But if not, you can actually register to be advised, as we've already been advised.
Jeremy has got
just one very quick point. The developer may choose to go for non-determination if let it take a long time over.
Yes.
So we just need to stay connected in terms
Yeah.
of watching out for that sort of
Okay. They have to have a good reason to do that, and a good reason would be the district council doing nothing. I wouldn't suggest they're going to do that, but it's a perfectly valid point.
Yeah. And this lady here would like to say something.
Just like to say to this gentleman, if he wants my vote, we are up
Yeah.
I'd like to see
I will take legal advice on that one.
We're moving into politics now.
But we are
in a pre-election period. I would.
Okay.
Yeah, we are.
There are a couple of factors in that. Is that I'm not up for election. I'm up for election next week, but I'm still going to be a councillor for 11 months, come what may. But in the end of May, they will decide whether they still want me as chair of the planning board or not.
Okay.
So it might be taken out of your hands. But if I'm still chair, the district council, annually we get told, yeah, you've done a good job, we'll keep you, or no, you've not, off you go, do something else. Well, I think I have personally.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would say that, wouldn't I?
Move on. We've got other stuff to get through. Thank you all very much for coming along. Very good to see you all, and I'm sure we will meet again. Can we have a 5-minute break? Can you stop the recording for 5 minutes?
Thank you.